Bantamweight fight coming up this weekend that hits like H2O, a dandelion sand, and a toupee. Papa, what are we doing here? Matt, we have a fight coming up between the Snow Leopard, Javid Basharat, taking on Mateus Mendonca out of Brazil, representing Shoot the Box Diego Lima. He's got a teammate competing before him in Allan Nascimento. He himself making his UFC debut is Mendonca. Undefeated records on the go. Somebody's O has to go. And for Basharat, this is a guy coming into the UFC I wasn't completely sold on, because if you look at it at the time, he was 11-0. He had just beaten Oran Kalon over on Dana White's Contender Series in 2021. A guy who completely missed weight, like not even close, and said a lot of dirty things before the fight. And Basharat looked great. Finishes him in the third round. Comes in, taking on Trevin Jones. Did we pick him to beat Trevin Jones? No, we didn't. And he looked amazing in that fight. And then he goes in and takes on Tony Gravely. Did we pick him to beat Tony Gravely?
I think I did.
You did, I didn't. But in that matchup, he looked really good against a former Division I wrestler out of Appalachian State. And he defended all of the takedowns. I didn't think that was going to happen in that fight.
That's what I was really wanted to bring up in this video. Javid Basharat reminds me a little bit of a guy like Jack Della Maddalena at 170. When you look at Maddalena, yes, he's a very hyped up prospect, but I said this during the video and I've said it ever since. When he beat Ramazan Imavov, that proves that you're a little bit more than just a regular prospect. Imavov might not get the glitz and glamour as being this, prospect beater by any means, but it's a really difficult fighter to make look bad. And for Tony Gravely, I kind of look at him as a similar level of opponent, if you will. Not saying they're perfect matches, but you get the idea. If you beat Gravely by defending his takedowns, hitting him on the feet, avoiding the big shots, well, those are showing us kind of the foundation and the building blocks to becoming a really talented fighter and to start fighting some of those ranked fighters. Because at bantamweight, there seems to be a pretty big step between unranked fighters and ranked fighters. We talk about the flyweight division a lot. Unfortunately, the flyweight division doesn't really have the level of depth that bantamweight has right now.
It's getting there. It really is getting there.
Bantamweight's probably the best division in the UFC right now, though. It's either bantamweight or lightweight, maybe featherweight. One of those three, I would say. But right now at 135, there's a lot of great fighters, and I do think Basharat is on his way to the rankings, but even in a division like this, we bring it up with lightweight, you're gonna win, 5, 6, 7 fights in a row? Yeah, and you better look damn good in each one of those.
If you look at it for Basharat, the thing that really scared me was, you've been able to take guys down in the regional scene, so he had all of those fights with 7 different promotions before he fought on Dana White's Contender Series, and the level of competition that he took on was 45-59 out of those fights, so it's not good at all. Comes into the UFC, beats Trevin Jones, who's wishy-washy. He was really wishy-washy in the UFC. But against Tony Gravely, defended 11 of 13 takedown attempts. And by the end of it, he was really punishing him. So that's a win that definitely holds a lot of water. And the big thing for Javid, and I don't know if it's something switched, but he, for the longest time, trained out of London Shoot Fighters. And you've had, Michael Venom Page out of that gym at points in his career. But for Basharat in the UFC in these 2 fights, camps out of Extreme Couture, and I think that's really helped him kind of round things out and take on a guy like Mateus Mendonca, and we'll definitely give him his flowers as we go along. This guy is a wild card when it comes to his fights on the feet, and when you do watch him, he might just be billed as a striker. He's got all these finished wins, and we'll talk a little bit about his MMA fighting article that was written about him in 2020 by Guilherme Cruz, because somebody was picking on his brother at Jiu-Jitsu gym, and Mateus Mendonca went in with a scalpel and thought he was going to try and make things happen. And then he got involved in MMA, and right now, 10-0, he beat Pedro Nobre, who was in the UFC for 1 fight, illegal strike. See you later, Pedro. But if you do look at it, he was 21 when he fought Nobre, and in that fight, a little bit of back and forth, he's able to drop Nobre as it goes on. But the things that I've learned out of Mendonca as a fighter out of Shoot the Box Diego Lima, yes, he's a striker, but he doesn't really strike high and tight like a lot of Muay Thai fighters. He strikes a lot more like Alex Oliveira. Limbs everywhere, throwing wild. And then when Mendonca decides he wants to grapple, it's not really technical grappling. It's powering all his strength into his takedowns. And then once Mendonca starts to get tired, he will kind of force himself into some of the grappling, the long-range takedown attempts, and they can get stuffed.
And Basharat has pretty good defensive submissions. We haven't really brought that up, but he does. He's got a really good guillotine. He can threaten off his back quite a bit. He's got good takedown defense. He's got his own wrestling. I just think for Mendonca, this is a really difficult matchup for him because, like you said, he's a fighter who relies a lot on not only his athleticism, but just the unorthodox style that he does possess into the cage. Being really unorthodox does help you sometimes. You know when it rarely helps you? Fighting a really good technician. And that's what I look at when I see Javid Basharat. He can fight on the back foot, he can fight moving forwards, and he doesn't waste a lot of punches. And I think that's the important thing in this fight. If he was a guy who was a real busy fighter, went out there and would miss some shots to then land his own power shots, then maybe Mendonca would be able to duck a jab, land his own counters, and maybe make something big happen. But the way that Basharat's able to stand on the back foot, I think he's going to be able to avoid some of those bigger shots.
Well, and if you do look at it for Mendonca, he fought 7 times in 2019. He beat the Titan FC champ, but with another promotion. But the guy was still the Titan champ in Hudson Cachoeira, and he looked great in that Future FC fight if you go back and you watch it. But for Mendonca, the trouble that I had going back and watching a lot of the tape was he's got a really, really great right hand. He throws from really odd angles with a lot of his strikes. He's got a prodding front kick that then he can change the angle and throw it as a teep, and he can really threaten to all 3 levels. But he leaves his head on the center line, and when you hit him, he can get hit, and then he brings his hands up when you're landing your second punch. Like, he leaves his hands down by his chest in a lot of his exchanges, so not a lot of technique in his striking defense. However, he's only 23 years old.
Oh, he's going to get way better.
He is going to get better. And like a teammate that he has in Daniel Willycat, a guy who I thought Willycat was different in the fact that he was just super wild, and I didn't know if he could bring it together in the UFC. All of a sudden, his last time out, he gets beaten up bad in the first round, and then he looks great in the second round against a really good fighter in Sexy Mexi, John Castaneda. So we have a look at this one in terms of the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprise to us there to you. I'm going to assume a guy who's won 2 fights in the UFC taking on a debuting fighter is going to be favored by the fans.
I would say.
So I'm going to say over under 82.5% Basharat.
I think it'll be in the 90s. I'll say over.
It is 90. 1,255 total votes, 90% Basharat, 71% by decision. For the 10% that have Mendonca, 36% by decision, 45% by knockout. So the fans favor Basharat. I mean, I think we gave both guys some pointers in this fight. There's things to look out for. And we even consider this as a possible fight of the night. Because Mendonca, win or lose, and he's never lost as a pro, is going to go out on a shield. And I think he only knows one way, go. So I don't have Mendonca in the fight, but I think it's going to be a fun fight.
I think he's going to make good account of himself, like you said. He doesn't know how to quit. He's going to march forward, try to land his own shots. I think he's fighting a guy who is very difficult to hit, can land his own counter shots. The weird thing about Basharat, too, is he's got this weird karate stance where he stands far away and leaves his head out, but he's also really good at wrestling when he decides to go forward, so it's a weird kind of pace change because you're on the outside expecting kicks, and all of a sudden he's in on your hips, so I like Basharat in this fight.
Muay Thai and boxing for Mendonca, and that varied approach from Javid Basharat, trying to make his brother proud. Old Farid, a couple of guys in the UFC, Matt, both of us going with the Snow Leopard to get the win for Extreme Couture. With some great fights on this card. Main event, Nasruddin Imavov, ranked 12th in the middleweight division, taking on the 13th ranked Kelvin Gastelum. It should be a great time. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.